Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Neil pick up the fat lad in the mother fluffing house, and it's part 2 with Paul Linn. We got 45 minutes in and realised we hadn't talked at all about arm wrestling. We're still on that winding road, getting to the origins of this guy and how he came to the sport. And Paul, I think you've just been telling us about the danger of wrestlers, or generally people who like taking a good hiding and embrace it.
Well, first, before I get lit up in the comments again about, having the same shirt on and everything else, I have a million of these. All different colors, a million Lethal Arm shirts. So it's not the same one.
Where can they get a Lethal Arms
www.shoplethalarms.com. Shoplethalarms.com. This shirt's available. I happen to have a multitude of them. So it's not the same shirt. It's not the same green shirt. I get that in the comments a lot.
we didn't intro your own YouTube channel. Give people a bit of info about where they can find out what you do. You do a lot of this stuff yourself online, obviously covering all aspects of arm wrestling, tournament footage, training footage, interview footage, and all that kind of thing. So just give yourself a bit of a plug, mate.
Yeah, we don't have a huge niche. Really what it is, I started my own YouTube channel early on in arm wrestling, and I was just uploading, just garbage from my phone, with the phone up and down, and it was bad early on. But it was just, the YouTube channel was entitled my name. It was just my name. Tried to go Devin has one, so I'll do one. And it was horrible. So if you want to dig through those old videos and watch me, as a novice arm wrestler, beating some whoever, wherever at 5 years ago, that stuff's on there. If you want to look at it, it's funny. But yeah, I kind of partnered up with Storm and his buddy, Matt Benjamin, who is a big WAL fan, who we arbitrarily met at one of the events. He was just there as a fan. And, it wound up that Storm knew him from back home. And I said, well, why don't we shift the gears of this channel that all I'm doing is making these terrible training montages and stuff with my iPhone straight up and down. Why don't we shift the gears? So we made it as kind of a network channel, it's Lethal Arm Assassins Network. And that Arm Assassins is really like Lucas Raymond and Storm's original team. So Matt Benjamin actually helps us with the editing and the tech stuff, pointed us in the right direction of getting some better cameras and things like that. And he gives us content ideas. We haven't been doing a whole lot because it's been tough with coronavirus.
Sure.
But yeah, check us out at Lethal Arm Assassins Network. And really what that channel is it doesn't have a gear. And we like the idea of using it for if somebody wants to come on and do an interview and get whatever information that they have about what they're doing out there, we're glad to do that interview. We're glad to do some practice footage at a good practice. If you want to use that channel you hit us up and you want to do some self promotion through the channel, that's what it's there for. It's a network, whatever anybody wants to do. So that's it.
Check it out, guys. Lethal Arms Apparel. Get yourself one of these shirts. Cool as hell. And, Paul will sort you out with that, as I say. And Paul's underselling himself big time there, as he so often does. But believe me, this guy trains with a crew of animals. You've got all that team there. I mean, Storm, he mentioned in there, trains a lot with Sam Harris. You've got a crew of killers down there, mate. And you travel extensively to get amongst the monsters. You spoke about that a lot in don't worry, we're going to track back to where Paul was in a moment. But you've traveled extensively to train with some of the very best in the game, and certainly North America's finest. Was that something you've always done in your sport career, mate? Have you always sort of been seeking out that? You spoke a lot in the first element about trying to surround yourself with people who were that level up or at a very high level. So when did that first develop?
Well, I think when it comes to football, it's such a different sport. You have your coaches. You know what I mean? You either grab it. Yeah, you got what you got. Now I've done camps and things like that, and I've sought out some expertise and things like that. But largely, in high school, I was blessed, man. My coach and staff was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So I had all these resources at my fingertips. I mean, when George Champ came back and took over the head coaching job, I think he hired 6 or 7 dudes with NFL backgrounds. We had I was coached by elite football players, from day one. So, and in football, nowadays there's a lot more available. It wasn't really available back then. Now kids can go to 7-on-7 camps and they can go work out for, different universities, and there's all these, junior days and all these different things. We didn't have that back then. So that was
Pennsylvania an area where forgive my ignorance, all the North American people don't come down on my ass in the comments because I'm obviously here in the UK, so my knowledge of football in the US is not great. Is Pennsylvania an area where there's a strong footballing tradition? Is there a lot of, because it's funny when you mentioned wrestling, which I do know a little bit about, I'm thinking Penn State immediately. I would, the Schultz boys and so on and so on and so on. So that's the joint alignment.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get killed in the comments. But years past, Pennsylvania has always been a top 5 state in football. It's always like top 2, 3 in wrestling. Our wrestling is unbelievable here. If you win sectionals or if you place top 3 in districts, not even states as a wrestler, you're going to school for free, pretty much. Wrestling's second to none. And we actually, the high school that I played at and coached at is a perennial powerhouse in wrestling. I mean, they got like 8 state championships. They were amazing. But Pennsylvania is a football state through and through. I wouldn't call it a speed state. Some of these guys from down south will eat me alive in the comments, but the southern states and the western states might have a little bit more speed, but we tend to have the studs and the scuds, the intermediate dudes, like the linemen. And it's a smash mouth state. It's a cold weather state. So that means if you're playing in a state championship, you are playing in the cold. So it's kind of a hard-nosed mentality.
Freeze the caveman. If you can stand the cold and the frosty fingers and smashed in the face when you're going to be okay. Son.
There are plenty of good Pennsylvania football teams that never make it deep in the playoffs because they can't play that brand of football. And then you got the Western PA guys, the Whitfield guys out in Pittsburgh, who, I mean, they thoroughly believe that they're the greatest in the country, and that conference is second to none. So yeah, it is most certainly a football state. And even at the college level, the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference has, I believe, 14 teams in it. That's Pennsylvania alone for Division II alone. Whereas when you start going out west to some of these powerhouses, they're the only D2 school in that state or in an 8-hour radius. So we talk about Travis Bajan's son, playing at Shepherd. Shepherd, like the decision to go there, I mean, that conference that they're playing in is even though it's so densely populated with and with Pennsylvania athletes, those D2 schools are every bit as good as 1AA's. I mean, Travis' son is unbelievable. Yes.
Tyson, he puts clips of Tyson training. I actually show Tyson my boys.
Yeah.
For real, I'll say, look, this kid's on his way.
Yeah.
That's what I want to get going. And he is,
It's an interesting path too, because Travis made the decision when Tyson had the opportunity to play at a Division I school. I think he made the decision to that's Travis's alma mater. And, he figured like, listen, if you're good enough, you can do it at the D2 level too, and you can. I've watched so many guys come out of the D2 ranks. I mean, I played, for 3 years with my good buddy Jyree Evans, is eventually going to be a Hall of Fame guard. For the Saints. I mean, he was the highest paid guard during his stint in the league, and this is a D2 guy. Just his circumstances brought him to that level. But, those Pennsylvania State Athletics Conference schools are just packed with talent. Plus, they'll get all the transfers from Pitt and Penn State and Ohio State and the local big schools. So yeah, Pennsylvania's.
You're in the homeland, the football there. It's a good place to be. Good place to be. So what age did you play football, mate? What were your sort of age range within that? And you've stayed in it as coach, but in coaching now.
Yeah. I started at age 13 and I'm going to now. I think this is my 14th year of coaching. I couldn't let it go. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where like, it's strange because, when I finished, playing, I had to make the decision to kind of walk away from it, and pursue my master's, which I was doing alongside of playing overseas. And I had to make that decision. The only way I was going to be able to finish this master's on time was to continue working on that because the upcoming season did not coincide. So it was one of those tough decisions because you lose your identity. Like you go your whole life being able to associate. And like I talked about in the previous one, I think being a football player and living a pseudo clean lifestyle, even when I'm around people who weren't necessarily, allowed me to get that title. Like I'm a football player, so I'm not going to do that. Or, you know what I mean? I'm a football player.
Yeah.
I lost my identity. It was like, now who am I?
Separation kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like, you know, you introduce yourself almost as a football player, and I lost that kind of, you know, that precursor to who I was. Then not to mention I lost, like, okay, now what am I lifting for? You know, I still love lifting. I still want to be strong, but why? You know, like, what am I chasing? And I spent a bunch of years training just to be stronger than the kids I was coaching, and it was enough of motivation for me. But yeah, that was a big time turning point. And at that point, I was just like, I have to get into coaching. And, one of my college, football coaches, I was the athletic director at local Bloomsburg High School. And he allowed me to do my internship through him. So I ran the strength program for that high school as my internship. So I had been working with these football players for a couple of years anyway. I said, well, you know, he was like, hey, we got a coaching job for you. We're not going to put you on the books, but we're going to pay, the booster club's going to pay you. And now you wind up making more money that way. So I did that during my last year of my master's. Coached there for 2 years. And then transitioned back home and got in contact with, a buddy who in that friend group had already come back and started coaching at our high school. So I now coach. Our D coordinator was my coach in high school. One of my closest, mentors in life. And he actually was the one that told me to go to my first arm wrestling tournament. So it's funny how it all just comes full circle. He drove me out to Pittston, PA, went with me and everything. He said, what are you doing, dude? You're good at arm wrestling. You've always been good at arm wrestling. Yo, arm wrestling.
So come on, you cannot miss that chunk, mate. You've got your guy there telling you're good at arm wrestling. Give us some stories. Let's hear some stuff about when you must have, you know, is it just with your lads who's the man?
I said I was telling people or I was telling the gentleman I did my last interview with, I said, my mom, like, my genetic background is really weird. Like, my dad's 6'6".
Holy. Yeah,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Come on, guys. And then my mom screwed me over because she's 5 flat.
So your dad was 6'6". Was he 6'6" big, or was he 6'6" tall?
Very lean, ectomorph. Okay. Very long and lean. Very long and lean. Yes. He was in prison he took up powerlifting and he did he had some decent numbers and everything like that. Yeah, long and lean, and did not come from an athletic background. He was kind of involved in the streets from day one. I think he ran a little bit of track when he was a kid. But my mom is the polar opposite. She's 5 foot flat and she's just like a powder keg. Like, I remember being a kid and she, at a young age, she had been battling with obesity. And I think she was up close to like at 5 foot. She was up close to like 300 pounds. And she made a big life change after I was born. First off, she found Christianity and really shifted focuses there. So she brought me up in the church, and she also brought me up with a strict like diet routine. She was doing aerobics and all this other stuff at the time. She lost over 100 pounds. So everything that I ate was strictly proportioned out and things like that. But my mom, as she lost weight, I realized like she was jacked. Like, my mom has huge biceps, and like you don't realize it. You know what I mean? She's got huge forearms. She's got huge calves, and she's just brute strong. And like, we would move from place to place and we'd be moving and I mean, she'd pick the refrigerator up, just do weird stuff. And she arm wrestled with me. We did that, like, we know what we're doing. I mean, lay on the floor and arm wrestle. And she didn't let me win for so long. I mean, she never let me win. It wasn't until like, I don't even know how old I was. She would kill me. She would kill me. And it wasn't, I guess it was right around like junior high and everything. And we arm wrestled at the lunchroom table all the time. I was still a small guy. We arm wrestled and everyone in lunch would arm wrestle. And I would never lose. And my buddy, one of my good buddies now, he was wound up being that true stud on our football team. Super athletic, mega strong, like weight room strong, like that 405 bench when we were like sophomores, like just a beast, and could run. And we arm wrestled every single day at the lunchroom table, every single day. And as a kid, so it was not something. It's funny, like some of my friends joke with me. They'll joke about it now on Facebook. Like, hey, you keep talking about you've been doing this for years. What are you talking about? I didn't know what I was doing at all. I'm just going sideways, whatever. And I remember losing 2 arm wrestling matches ever. Like unofficial, whatever. And, the first one was against a gentleman. I'll never forget, it's any sports. When somebody beats you or when somebody in football, like if you get lit up, if somebody blows you up, like you remember that person,
Mm-hmm.
like they take a piece of your soul with them. You know what I mean? And there's a kid that when I was in elementary school, he lived in the city too. And he wound up going to Harrisburg High. His name was Tim Brown. And, he wound up having a very successful college career at West Virginia University. He was huge. And at this point, I just thought he was a doppy big kid. He was 2 years older than me. And I remember in elementary school, he waxed me. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was just blown away. And then the next time there was a bar, and I'm finding all this out, in hindsight. Apparently this bar hosted the old Yukon Jack qualifiers.
Really?
Yes, and I was working in a warehouse when I was out of college, and they had a table there. It was the old inline pads, and it was just there.
The
and I was like,
the ring pads.
And I was like, there's an arm wrestling table. Let's go start arm wrestling. Yeah. So it wound up being like 2 hours of drinking and arm wrestling, and finally, some big diesel guy comes up, boom, and I don't know what I'm doing. He puts me in a hook and burns me out. And my buddies never let me live it down. Never. Because at that point we had no understanding like that, hey, you were tired or whatever or anything like that. You just assume if you lose, that person's better than you and you'll never beat them. And that's what I felt like, in my first experiences of arm wrestling. Yeah. So that was kind of like my progression in it. And what's funny, and another funny story about that bar is a guy that I worked with and still work with now, freak athlete for sure. He's an older gentleman, but he was the one that told me about the Yukon Jack qualifiers back then. And I don't know who was hosting that tournament, but they had someone there. They had like an elite pro supposedly at the time, but he said he was very small. He was like 175, 160 or something like that. And they had something out. They had like an open invitation out there that was $1,500 if anybody could beat this guy. And this guy that I work with said he went up and beat him and said, where's my money? And they made him arm wrestle him again. He beat him again. And he said that was the last time he ever arm wrestled because his elbow was so messed up. But apparently this guy that I work with beat whoever the representative
whoever
was.
It was. Yeah, which is a hell of an achievement if that was a professional puller.
And now I can't sort out, like I've asked people several times, like, who was doing the Yukon Jack? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yep. And that was the first time I'd ever seen an arm wrestling table. And at that point, I didn't even know it really was an arm wrestling table or anything about it, really, other than, what you see on Over the Top and everything.
Yeah. So when was the sort of first, you talked about your mate there saying to you, look, you got to go into arm wrestling. How did that come about? Did he see a tournament or where did it sort of originate in that respect?
I watched Game of Arms. Like Game of Arms came out and had everybody talking. It really did. And I say this and I sat in bed with my wife watching this stuff and she was like, turn it off. I couldn't turn it off. I binge watched the whole thing. I couldn't turn it off. And there was, like, I do not want to watch any more of this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I think I could beat some of these guys. And I don't know what it was, but like certain guys, Mike Solaris dominated that show. And in my mind, I'm like, there is no way that I can't compete with that guy. How is that? Like, I have to see if truly these professional arm wrestlers really are that elite. Yeah. If there's that, and that's kind of what sparked it. And I looked it up. I got on the Northeast board and I had mentioned the, tournament in Pittston, Scranton area. And this coach was from that area. And I was just talking about it in passing. He was like, oh, we're going. I'm definitely going. I want to go. Let's go. You know what I mean? So we got in the car with him and one of my buddies and we just showed up. And it was funny. There was this local energy drink too that had just come out and it was like a pyramid scheme and he got himself into that. So he was trying to sell and promote this energy drink. Yeah. And all right, let's go to this tournament. We're going to put you in this shirt, and you're going to go win this tournament and I'm going to sell these energy drinks. So yeah, I didn't win the tournament. I did not win the tournament. I did win novice.
What went down then when you went to the show? Was there a lot of faces that are still there now, or how was that for you?
It was small. It was like a fundraiser tournament, and I mean, if you know Nitro, Tom Nitro Simcoe, it was one of his promotions. It was a local. Now Pistons got a lot of good arm wrestlers, and there were some very good arm wrestlers there. But it was one of those deals where it was like $199 and up.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
It was like 2 classes. So to make it, and they paid out and everything based on the entry fees. And it was a fundraiser tournament, and they were paying out for the novice class. And I was like, okay, well, I'll start with novice. Yeah, I'll start with novice. My first match ever was a left arm match against Sam Pocksher, if you know Sam. He's out west, and he went to Slotty and everything. And those were our first matches were against each other.
Tremendous.
And yeah, it was just it's ironic. Now obviously there's a big weight gap there because that was an open one in novice. So I won the novice right and left, and threw myself into pros. And Bill Runkle was in that class. And Bill's beating some dudes. He's beating ILO, and yeah. So I lost to Bill, and he waxed me. And you know how when you don't know what you're doing at all. And at that point I had watched enough videos and I watched enough that I understood what a top roll was. I understood what a hook was. I knew the basics only from watching Devin videos. And all I was doing is going high side pressure, cupping, hitting. And Bill was so strong and his forearm was so long. It was just boom. And my buddies who came along with me were like, oh, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. And I wound up beating his brother Mike, who was a national title holder in that same tournament. And I lost to Joe Gogochi, who was also a national title holder. Now, in my mind, I didn't know these guys from Adam. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I just lost in arm wrestling. Like, it didn't matter who I lost to. I lost at this local tournament that I was, and I had it was like some soul searching to do. Like, well, am I meant for this or not? And it was funny because, I don't know if Black Ice. He's been involved in, WAL. He was pretty much the only person that came up to me and was like, yo, I think you have a lot of potential. Nobody else really, you know what I mean? It was kind of like the standoffishness or whatever, and probably the way we presented ourselves at this thing. But he said, yeah, let me know if you want to practice. And I got his number and his training partner's number. And I was like, cool. Let me know. I'll hit you up, and see if there's another tournament or whatever if I decided to pursue this. And I had to do some soul searching because I was really humbled, and I hurt my shoulder. I didn't know what I was doing. I did not. Yeah. My subscap. Yeah. My subscap to this day is not fully recovered from that. And that was just going sideways without my hand. So I was battling with and I went home and I couldn't bench press anymore. I couldn't flat bench. I couldn't come the whole way down, and I was trying to push through that. So I had to, I took a couple months and did some soul searching, and I found another tournament. And I didn't go to any practices or anything, but I went to a Winter Blast, which was held by Sue Fisher and all those guys in New Jersey, Jim Bryant, blah, blah, blah. That's where I met everyone. Tim Breslin and Ron Klemba were reffing, and it was a huge tournament. And I went into the amateur class in that tournament, and it was like 18 guys in the amateur class, and it was 199 plus again. And I won that. And, at that point I didn't enter the pro class because it was stacked and everything else. But I actually spoke a little bit to Sam Harris, and Tim Lewis reached out to me and was like, listen, I'm going to come down and train with you because we worked on the table. He was like, I'm coming to train with you. You're not going to stop arm wrestling. So he came down and trained with me, in the coming weeks. But it was at that tournament that, he pointed me in the direction of Tim and Ron. And, I think that's kind of going back to what you were saying about putting yourself around, those that you can learn from.
Yeah.
I think at that point I was like, okay, I gotta learn from somebody. Like, I'm not learning by just arm wrestling. So I asked Ron if he had any, if he would make me a table. And he said, I got one laying around. He said, just, you're going to have to, I don't want to ship it to you. He said, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. He said, why don't you come up to practice? And that was about a 6-hour drive, a little bit under 6 hours. And I went the next couple weeks. And it was, it was brutal. It was brutal learning. You know how it is when you first get started.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, those guys don't take it easy at all. And Tim, I think was preparing. I forget what he was preparing for. Oh, I don't know what it was at the time. He was preparing for a match. I forget who it was.
Probably one of the events in Vegas or something like that. He was pretty extensively involved in those, wasn't he?
Yep. And, And, they end their practices with King of the Table with Tim and stuff. And it just goes and goes and goes. And I remember never feeling that level of pain from football ever, like that toothache pain. And to be honest with you, that masochistic mentality, I think is actually what got me hooked. I was like, I never thought that this would be that hard and that painful. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of drove me like, all right, I always enjoyed getting sore at the gym, and this was a whole nother level of it, and I was like, wow, if that's what one practice will do to you, I got to get to the point where I can at least negate a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I learned, I got to work with, Philip Hertz. Was currently staying in up there in Connecticut to do exactly just to train with Ron and Tim. He had moved there just for the training is what I was under the understanding of. And he was very positive with me also, where not everybody was. He was like, you must continue to arm wrestle. Yeah. And at that point I didn't get it. I did not understand a top roll. I didn't understand these things. I just understand like high side pressure and hitting. And I was able to, to at least make somewhat of an impression on these guys through that. And I think the addiction to the grind and realizing after seeing everything that Ron had there, all the training tools, I was like, wow, I can, there's some stuff I can be doing here. I can shift my training and now have some goals. So that's kind of how it progressed. After that, then I started setting out to go to work with everybody. I found Dave Morocco, who's probably been one of my largest mentors in the sport. Yes, and he's so willing to help, and he opens his home to everybody. And he had some tanks down there at the time, and Mike Homewood, Kenny Smith's down there. Maryland Armwrestling's great. So that's actually not too far from me. It's about an hour and 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Travis is an hour and a half. So I've gone multiple times to work with him. Marcio's 2.5 hours. Storm's 2 hours. That's where I go the most, because he and I mesh very well. Yep. And Sam's only about 2.5 hours. And Sam, I think is, if I had to credit somebody, technically for advancements, and understanding, I give a lot of credit to Sam Harris and Barry Hurst, if you know him. And I'm trying to,
absolutely no Barry.
He doesn't, Barry has helped me so much. He was living with Morocco at the time. Mm-hmm. And we really clicked. And he really, really, really changed my game. And I know Travis don't talk about it a whole lot. You get him online every once in a while and he'll admit it, but Barry was largely his mentor too. So stylistically, a lot of that coming from Barry. So yeah, those have been the people. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with Devin, a bunch of people. And, we train closely with Michelle Dugan and James Reed. Also, that's kind of like my promotional business partner. And, one of the people I'm closest to in the sport. So we really have collaborated, especially Sam, Storm, Michelle and I. We've collaborated quite a bit. And, so I've been blessed in that aspect. And it, like, a lot of people don't have the geographical, advantages that I have in that I don't have to travel as far as some people do. I don't bat an eye at a 2-hour drive. But I know other folks, they might have to drive 8 to get to a real good training hub, but we're blessed. And I think I'd mentioned to you prior, Central Pennsylvania is like, there was no arm wrestling here in Harrisburg and Central Pennsylvania until we kind of got everything started. Now it's become kind of a mecca for tournaments. Like we're going to have our Keystone State Championship coming up here in a couple weeks.
Saw that the other day. Do you want to just give everybody information on that, mate, while we're talking about it?
Labor Day weekend, Saturday, Keystone State Championship. We're being forced to hold it outside because of the coronavirus and everything. We're going to take all the proper precautions and everything, but we are still looking for a large turnout, especially based off of what we're seeing on social media so far. So obviously we're not able to do the cock of the walk and all the pageantry that we normally do, but I think we're going to put out a killer tournament. And a lot of that has to do with where we're at geographically. We can get everybody from New Jersey. We can get everybody from Delaware, Maryland, New York. They all come, and even though the borders are shut down, we might not get some of the Canadians. I still think we're going to have probably a 300 entry tournament. So I can't wait. We're blessed in this area. And especially from a promotional aspect, like our tournaments, if promoted correctly around here, turn out really, really good with a lot of talent. So,
like you say, you got a killer crew around you and a lot of buzz and hype around the sport there, and you can't beat that. It feeds and grows, and it sort of manifests itself into some really positive. And you often find if you get like a bit of a hotbed of arm wrestling talent, it's amazing. That really transcends into the pullers that start to come and practice with you, compete with you. You find that there's a real crew of animals, and I think that's consistent with any sport, really.
Yeah.
If you get that little hub of activity, people start to come in, and then you'll see it resonate out, and suddenly there's another champion, and another one. They're all tracking back to that same nucleus, if you will.
Yeah, I talked to Ron Klemba about it when him and Tim set up their. I mean, like their training facility is great. It's like it's like in a second level of a barn. It's so great. Like it's got the old arm wrestling machines, everything. And it was like so epic. I'm like, dude, how did you amass this team? And, you say you do this every Saturday. Like how did this happen? And Ron was like, well, I just started arm wrestling and I started winning. And I won a couple national titles, and people say, hey, where do you train? I said, I train in my barn. Come on down. And he said, with every title, it seemed like, with more success came more and more, and the team kind of just developed itself. And it's funny how that works out. And it's strange in Pennsylvania though too, because when I first got started, I was so gung ho. Not that I'm not anymore. But I was like desperate to promote the sport locally. I'm like, this is a sport. There are athletes who can compete in their golden years. You can still be competing. And I mean, I'm telling everybody I know, and I'm getting on social media and blasting it. And before you know it, it's kind of been almost like, the opposites happen. Like we developed this big team early on. The team Lethal Arms thing, all new arm wrestlers for the most part. But then we start, now we have to go work with this person. So that nucleus of what we had there, the understanding of, hey, we have to go get with better arm wrestlers or we're not going to get better. It kind of broke the team out now.
Fragmented.
We'll still have practices, but it's not going to be like a team. It's going to be people coming from everywhere. But there's these different nucleuses everywhere in Pennsylvania. Like you can find a practice any weekend or almost, you around here, driving distance, you can find a practice like
that.
Easily.
Convenience is great though, isn't it? And like you say, having pullers like yourself, Storm, Travis not far away. I mean, you just mentioned him a moment ago, the Chief, massively underrated, Klemba, rocks.
Unbelievable.
I mean, don't be wrong, 175 years old when he fought.
Yeah.
Well, he's like me, he's an old stone dude. On the top of the Resnick, same. What a monster.
Yep.
Old stone, rock strong. Tim, love me some Tim Bresnan.
Yep.
He needs to sort his Skype out though. Tim, sort your Skype out, son.
He's old school, buddy. He's old school.
It took about probably a couple of years before I even thought about doing a YouTube channel. I was talking about Ron Bath getting on YouTube. But I've got him. So my next target is Tim Bresnan. Myself and Tim have been going backwards and forwards on Messenger for a couple of months now, and he's never managed to get his Skype sorted out. So anybody that's near Tim, go and give him a lift. Get that Skype sorted.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to do it for him probably. Or you're just going to have to settle for recorded audio. You can maybe just put a picture up like Ryan Bowen used to do.
Yeah.
That's good enough,
So, mate, when did you sort of start getting some real wool on your back? When did you start getting teeth? Because my first introduction of you was working at the Arnold's, totally different sport, and I just went over to watch the arm wrestling, as you do. You know, I'll just sneak away from the booth for 5 minutes, and I'm going to go and watch arm wrestling. So I get down there, and as I walk up, you're hanging off Craig Touyer's arm. Yeah. Just scared him to death. And I'm like, who the f*** is that guy?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's Paul Linn. Yeah, he's back. And I didn't even get to meet you that day, but I made notes.
You know, that would have been that would have been my opportunity to meet you. He slipped up. Yeah, Travis and I got a bunch of text messages after that match, and Travis was like, "What the hell are you doing, dude? You needed to win that match." You know, he's like, "What's wrong with you?" At that point, I was just delving into really understanding technique and everything. But I think, like, you know, after the, what's that?
How long had you been involved? How long had you been pulling then?
Oh, I don't know. Probably into my second year or first year or whatever. It was right around that. My first 4 months, I decided. Tim Lewis said, "Hey, you got to stop going to these small tournaments, and you got to get your ass to a pro tournament and blah blah blah." And he said, "We're going to nationals in South Carolina," and that would have been my fourth month in, and that was my first weight cut to 195, and I overshot it. I cut down to like 193, and I did it the wrong way. It was not enough water. I was depleted too long. It was stupid. You live and you learn. And I still did well in those classes. I took fourth, right, and left. I was still not confident at the time, so I entered left arm novice, and I won that easily. And Karen was like, "You are not pulling right arm novice." And that's okay. All right, do whatever. And I took fourth. I lost to Michael Bianchi and John Tubes. And I think at that point it was like that was the first time I had not placed, you know. And it was like. But I was understanding that I needed to have more, like, in my repertoire.
Yep.
That I can't just go out and be faster and stronger than everybody. I have to learn how to arm wrestle. And I think it wasn't but a couple months after that until I started really progressing. I did the WAL amateur thing in 2017, which was still my first year. I had missed the qualifiers for that and everything. So no. I had gone to qualifiers. That was the beginning of the ranking system. And
okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I was still in my first year, and, you know, Lucas Raymond had gone out there and won the amateurs the year prior, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I've never been to a tournament this big. I'm going to maintain my amateur status. But I went, you know, we hosted some tournaments, and I pulled the pro class in 225 in all the qualifiers I was at. Yep. The only people I lost to were Storm, Dave Weekland, and Marcio throughout those three qualifiers. So I took a bunch of second places to those guys. But at that point, that's when people started giving me shit a little bit, like, what the hell are you doing pulling amateur? And I was just like, I'm not there yet. But I think that was when I really started, like, people started saying, like, all right, you're taking seconds, you're making certain people arm wrestle, like, and this is still my first year. And a week prior, 5 days prior to that finals out in Vegas, we hosted a PAF Northeast Championship for Powerhouse Promotions or whatever in Harrisburg. And I pulled the 200 class, against Anthony Snook. And at that point I beat him fairly convincingly. I was kind of at I was at around that level then. And then I went and pulled the finals 5 days later, and won both right and left in the amateur there. And I got a bunch of flack on the internet, and Artem and these different guys were killing me about doing it. But, at that point, that's where, you know, I said, this is my milestone. I want to experience WAL as an amateur. And, you know, I know it wasn't the production and the pageantry that it was the year before, but it didn't make a difference to me. I got to meet all these guys. I got to learn from all these guys. And, you know, I got to after pool with a lot of guys. And I honestly think that, my credibility, has probably come more, from practice table pulling, I think, than maybe actual like tournaments. My first year of arm wrestling, I counted at one point. I think it was over 20 tournaments.
I think maybe notoriety, Paul, yeah, but I don't know about credibility, mate. I'm over here in the UK and I knew about, as I say, once I saw that situation with Craig, I was like, right, I made notes, and when I got home, I was speaking to WAL about what do you know about this guy? And speaking to other pullers, where's this Paul Linn come from? What's his gig? Because you looked at the part, obviously, you clearly were, you had a meteoric rise. I started searching you out and seeing you, and you're getting wins over people like Brendan Mulvihill, good solid pullers who I was very aware of. Right. And every time I seemed to switch something on, you were kicking somebody else's ass, and they were always, a good puller. You weren't beating bums; you were beating good lads regularly. So I think don't underestimate some of the wins you've had and the manner in which you did that. And for you to do that at the time you've had in the sport is extremely impressive, mate. Very, very impressive.
Like I said, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have a really good foundation of people around me who have really allowed me to progress along. I think I came into the sport with a really strong base already. And those folks helped sharpen me and sharpen my weak spots, and sure me up. So, and I think I can't take credit for it because it's not like, I walked in, like some of these guys are just so genetically gifted, like huge hands and everything else. And I don't necessarily have that. I just have a strength background. I have like old muscle fibers that's been developed over time. And then, like I said, you're only as good as the company you keep. And I've been blessed to have great company around me that's kind of helped me move forward.
Yeah, it's certainly doing the job, mate. It really is. I mean, we're at 41 minutes into this second element, and I know that Paul's got another engagement that's already lined up, so I don't want to keep him any longer, ladies and gents, but that rounds up this one. We have got plenty more to come from Paul Linn. Hope you're enjoying the show so far, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back with part 3. If this is your first visit to Supernatural Strength and you want to see more of this guy, please come back, check it out, like, subscribe, tell people about it, and until we see you next time, take it easy, peeps.